Thank you for your time. My name is Betula, and this is Bet on It, Shooting from the Hip. I appreciate you being here. Please keep in mind what we are doing here on Bet on It, Shooting from the Hip. We explore human ideas, philosophies, noteworthy information. This exploration is us thinking aloud, a thought exercise, jumping into ideas and examining them and re-examining them. You will find that we are prone to using both adult language and expressing opinions. In keeping with that, you shouldn't believe anything we say. We are not experts of any kind. We are just having fun with these ideas, philosophies, and information, in the hopes that you will find it fun and interesting and entertaining. We encourage you to invest time into searching out these subjects and come to your own conclusions. Now, on with the shit show! How you doing, Slam?
Doing good. How are you doing?
It's excellent! On today's episode, we are going to be discussing DMT. So DMT is an abbreviation for dimethyltryptamine. So for any of you who are listening to this and not in the know, it's a compound that people use that achieves heightened, elevated states of consciousness. And it's in the last probably the 15 years, more specifically, it's gained a ton of momentum among people, but not as a recreational drug, as a way to maybe combat mental health issues. And this controversial idea that maybe it might also open up other dimensions of reality to our nervous system to experience and to engage with. And there are those who think that the entities encountered within the DMT experience are not products of our brain on drugs, but actual disembodied intelligences, which very, very well could be true. Now, having said all of that, just to be clear, well, let's just start with, I'm going to read from my note package, but I want to start with or open with the statement that reality that we experience is a product of your brain, and it's all in your head. So everything that you imagine that you are seeing, feeling, touching, hearing, smelling, all those sensory inputs are interpreted in the brain, and then the thing that you see within your visual acuity is a product of that interpretation. So having said that, then it's only a small minority of what there is potentially to experience, because we don't have extra sensory apparatus to be able to experience the much larger reality that we're probably part of. And so this is my opening statement. So that DMT, which is naturally occurring in our bodies, is produced in our liver, lungs, and our brain. It's found in our cerebral spinal fluid and in the fluid that encapsulates our brain. That it may be the very thing that allows for us to have a much larger and greater experience than what you're currently having, because what you're currently having is tied exclusively to that sensory input. Now, having said all of that, the intake of DMT as a drug or in the form of ayahuasca isn't the only way to achieve this state. To be clear, that there are many examples of people achieving the same state through meditation. So it's suggestive that then not only are we capable of doing it, we're supposed to be able to do it. Right? The difference between the meditation and taking a consumable form of DMT, the chief difference between the two is when it's a consumable, it's a very intense experience and typically very short. So it's very difficult to unpack the experience because it's so intense, and it's so quick. But with meditation, it's a slow burn. So it gives you the capacity to unpack the experience over the course of years, not just months. And then so that you can become maybe perhaps so familiar within the experience that then you can navigate that environment with competence. All right. Now, having said all that, let's just jump into the note package because I think you're going to find the information kind of really fascinating. We're not going to be too heavy-handed with all the information about dimethyltryptamine, but it is noteworthy, and you should have a basic awareness of it. So it's a tryptamine, and so tryptamines are naturally occurring, and it's a biochemistry compound, and serotonin is also a derivative of it. So tryptamines actually contribute to a lot of the hormones that actively engage our physiology, right? So, and it's produced from tryptophan, and it uses a process called decarboxylation, right, which is basically the removal of carbon dioxide, and then it or CO2, so then allows for it to become the compounds like serotonin and DMT. All right, so it's often predominantly an hallucinogen, and it plays an important role, a biomedical role actually, as a neurotransmitter and a neuromodulator and a vasoconstrictor and a vasodilator, an antimicrobial and antibacterial and antioxidant and antifungal agent. So the tryptamines are integral into the operation of our biology, particularly as it relates to the nervous system, which gives us gives us the depth of our dream experiences, allows for that. So again, you can see that that it's a natural occurring substance. So you could be experiencing the effects of it through the entirety of your life and not have known that that's what was going on, right? So again, it's very natural. It shouldn't be treated as something like LSD or cocaine or any of those other drugs that can produce potent hallucinogenic effects, right? They're not entirely the same, right? So it occurs naturally in many plants, animals, and including us humans. The method by which you can ingest DMT is can be inhaled, consumed, or injected. Its effects depend on the dosage and the method of administration. So if you smoke it, a very intense experience, inhaled or injected, the effects last a short period of time, 5 to 15 minutes. So that's super intense. So it's like being on a roller coaster, right? So let me ask you, last time you were on a roller coaster, how much of the ride could you recall post the experience, other than the thrilling sensation, stuff like that, but any minute details of the actual ride?
I can't say I remember how it felt going through like loop-de-loops, but you can recognize the general experience somebody has. It's like,
Okay.
oh, it was a little scary but fun.
Okay, so, and if the experience is the way it's been characterized, is to give people access, insights into themselves in that 15 minutes, how well are you going to be able to recount those insights into yourself compared to the more broad, thrilling kind of experience of the ride itself, right? So I guess what the point I'm trying to illustrate is that, so choosing to inhale it like smoked or injected, that it's this very short and intense experience that's very hard to unpack, right? So, and we'll get to why that's important. Effects can last 3 hours or more when orally ingested, as long as it's with monoamine oxidase inhibitor. So the inhibitor, so when you consume it, it goes through the gut. Without the monoamine oxidase inhibitor, the gut would not allow for the DMT to penetrate into your system.
Oh, I'm familiar with some history of this, yeah.
Okay, so that's why the brew ayahuasca, which is referred to in the Amazon as the vine of the souls, and the entity they encounter is Mother Ayahuasca. That's why they brew two extracts from two different plants. They brew the inhibitor, and then they brew out the DMT from the plant matter, and then they combine it for that consumable. And that's why it has to occur that way. Otherwise, your gut would prevent the DMT from having any effect. All right, so again, super interesting. 200,000 plants in the Amazon rainforest, and makes you wonder, how did the indigenous people come to figure out which two worked together in that capacity, right? So, you know, trial and error. That have been thousands of years of trial and error, and you have to record every negative time it didn't work. But when asked, the indigenous people's response were that the plants told them.
Yeah, it's a very strange way to think about it from our culture.
Right, but if there's some researchers now who are saying that plants are conscious, right? So for all of those, you know, vegans who argue that you're killing another intelligent living thing when you're consuming animal flesh, well, the fact of the matter is you may be consuming another intelligent living thing when you're eating plant matter. So the point is that you have to be okay with the fact that that's why those things in part exist. They exist for a very specific function and role, which is to sustain our existences, right? Because everything's interrelated, so you can't treat them like they're separate. The question is, what kind of quality and reverence do you bestow upon anything that you would eat? You treat it with the highest regard, of course, right? But that's not exactly what we do, right? Factory farming and all that nonsense. So having said all that, so let's get back to the Amazonian tribes. So for them, it's something that they even introduce to young children in small amounts, right? So they hold it in the highest regard. For them, it's a sacrament as part of their faith-based belief systems. So again, so they have every right to be doing what they're doing, and what they're doing is again the kind of thing that's, particularly in the last, say, 25, 30 years, has picked up momentum in the first world, in the Western world, where now you have people who are actively seeking out the experience. And again, it has a lot to do with how profound the experiences are in terms of the effects on you as the individual. And because when you consume it as the ayahuasca brew, the experience is drawn out. It's hours, 3 to 6 hours. Then it gives you time to unpack the experience, and you can draw some relevant insight from the experience that'll have a practical effect in the way that you live your life currently today. So it's a very interesting thing to keep in mind, right? DMT does produce these vivid projections of mystical experiences that are very euphoric, and they're dynamic. They're referred to as pseudohallucinations, right? Because pseudohallucinations of geometric forms. So we'll get into the distinction between a hallucination and the DMT realm. We'll make the distinction. That's up for you to decide whether there's any value in it or they're just splitting hairs. But the hallmark of the effect of DMT, this vivid projections that you experience, are often characterized as being more real than real. So then the experience that you're actually having is equivalent to your day-to-day experience. That in terms of its vividness, its sense of realism, that it feels no less real than what you currently experience in your waking state, right? So again, it makes it it super, super fascinating, the fact that this is going on. So there are great many researchers who are actually studying this subject. And one of the oldest researchers, one of the first ones to actually study the effects of DMT on humans, is Rick Strassman. He's an American clinical associate professor of psychiatry at the University of New Mexico School of Medicine. So somebody with incredibly high standing. He also held a fellowship in clinical psychopharmacology research at the University of California, San Diego, and a professor of psychiatry for 11 years at the University of New Mexico. Highly qualified, right? So he's the first person in the United States to undertake human research with the psychedelic hallucinogenics or entheogens, right? And the substance dimethyltryptamine, he authored the book, The DMT, the Spirit Molecule. Highly recommended if you're looking for something to read, just to sort of like to try to get a more deeper insight, more than what we'll cover here, okay? It includes reflections and conclusions based on the research. So the question that's often asked is, what is the purpose of endogenous DMT? The fact that like it occurs so to be clear, endogenous means that it's naturally occurring within our own body, right? So there's no definitive answers, but there's fascinating questions. So one of the questions is, does the brain make DMT to sort of allow for us to better experience reality? So low doses actually allow for us the capacity that we currently have in experiencing our waking state, that in some way that it's active, but again, remember the dosage is important. So a very, very small dosage allows for us to have the vivid waking experience that we experience day in and day out. Make any sense?
I think so, yeah.
Yeah, so that's a speculation, but again, they can't be absolutely certain. So to that end, the Imperial College, which is a leading research institute in the United Kingdom, is taking on a completely legal study that has two purposes. One, attempting to map the landscape and the literal realm of DMT experience. And two, possible therapeutic uses and outcomes applying volunteers intravenously fed DMT. So then they're able to sustain the DMT trip, and in the course of that sustained trip, they're paired up with a researcher who then will go through a series of questions asking them about the experience as they're having it. Now, it's the Imperial College in the UK isn't the only place that's doing it now, and because it's been authorized to do that. Now there are institutions in the United States that are also carrying out the same research. So to them, the experiences within the DMT realm, the fact that there's this high occurrence of reoccurring themes like geometric shapes, encounters with entities that are in some way part animal, part human, mechanical elves, disembodied intelligences, all this stuff that's occurring that for all intents and purposes doesn't make any sense, at least not to our day-to-day cognitive mind, that it's like so far afield and so outside the experience. You could understand why people would characterize that it's just the brain on drugs, right?
Right.
But here's this trippy thing. What if then the effects on the nervous system has allowed for the nervous system to broaden its sensory inputs? So typically it only draws from the five senses, right? Sight, sound, smell, taste, touch, hearing, right? Those five senses. What if, and you'll forgive the expression, it allows for an extrasensory perception. So outside the limits of those senses, it opens up the nervous system to be able to comprehend the much larger reality. So let's say, for the sake of argument, those five senses only represent 5% of the totality of the reality that we experience. That means there's 95% of what is going on we're completely oblivious to. So these, again, this could encapsulate those other dimensions. Any thoughts, feelings, something you'd like to say?
Yeah, I was going to add, it's also very interesting how there's like this religious aspect to it. If you're not religious yourself, you can at least understand these people's experiences were so potent that they came back with like a sense of like true purpose or meaning that's outside of the regular reality. That does not make it unreal, that makes it something like metaphysically real. Like if their realization was something like drastic, like if they got a different sense of personal capability, like you're saying there may be additional senses that we're able to experience.
Yeah, oh, as a result of the consumption of the DMT, because so let me just explain that. So the natural occurring amounts aren't enough to maybe trigger that, and then say within the general human population, there's a small minority that can have unload an unusually high amount of DMT into their own system endogenously. But for the rest of us, it would have to be something that you take externally that would produce that effect. That so you have a high dose of it introduced into the nervous system, and the nervous system responds by opening up its ability to interpret reality, right? So it's interpreting a much larger reality that's not unreal. It exists. It's just that typically we don't have access to it based on the sensory inputs. There's only so much information you can get from those five senses. So the nervous system, once it's lit up with the DMT, now it has the capacity to exceed the information it's receiving from the outside environment.
Yeah, our body naturally compresses some senses just to make it more capable to have like the existence we have.
But it might not be tied to our senses.
Right, in this case, true. But like there's other senses people aren't aware of that we do have. Like we, without conscious input or effort into like experiencing it, we do react to electromagnetic. I'm having a hard time with that.
It's okay. Electromagnetic fields. You're right.
Yeah.
Like it can influence the way our nervous system functions. But again, it alters the way it functions, but so does DMT. So then because I've also heard that people, struck by lightning can have similar experiences, right? So that it opens up the nervous system in a different way. That's a very violent and traumatic kind of way, where taking DMT is a little bit, well, by comparison, is a lot more innocuous. So it's something a lot more. I don't know if subtle is the right word, but it's certainly a lot more subtle than being struck by lightning or meditating yourself into that altered state. And I've heard some refer to specifically the form of meditation that might actually induce that is holotropic breathing, and I think we've talked about that in a previous episode. It's basically controlled hyperventilation for like 3 hours. So, which is to me is always like I'm going, how do you sustain like a controlled hyperventilation for over the course of 3 hours? I don't think I could do it for 3 hours.
I'm sorry, but as far as meditations go, that method seems kind of funny. Like if I introduced it to a friend and I did it in the most like layman's term as I could, it's like, hey man, we hyperventilate for 3 hours and you're gonna see stuff. He's like, yeah, no, of course.
Yeah,
hyperventilate for 3 hours.
So again, I'm not suggesting that you go out and do that. I'm just, again, it's more fascinating the implications of what's going on.
Yeah.
Of what the experience produces. It gives you insights into, like I say, a much larger reality. The way that experts in the field like Andrew Gilmore think of the human brain, it constructs the model of reality within the brain. So everything within your visual field of acuity isn't real in the sense that, like, You can't be absolutely certain that this is the entirety of the waking state. It's just the way that your brain interprets it, the light, and again, sensory input from your eyesight, right? So the reality that we're experiencing, as vivid as it is, it's still in your brain. You're not experiencing the external reality. You're only experiencing the external reality based on the way your brain interprets the information it gets from the external reality. So the nervous system's actually then, therefore, you can kind of conclude that the nervous system then is designed specifically for that purpose, right? So it creates a complete consensus kind of reality. What do I mean by that? So if we're standing outside and or we're at the beach and it's a beautiful day and you can see the waves and you feel the sand on your feet, that experience that you're having, we commonly share that experience. So that it should say something to the effect that then our nervous systems work in a similar fashion. There might be slight variation, but for the most part, what we're experiencing, it's what I experience is what you experience, right? Based on the fact that the brain is designed to have that experience based on the limited sensory inputs or sensory information that it gets from the five senses, right?
Right, because the sensory information is present regardless of us actually paying attention to it. It's like if I were at that beach and I said, "Oh, it's cold," you would look at me and be, "No,
it's warm." Yeah, but again, everybody else on that beach would be having a similar experience. And again, because of the way our nervous system's designed, it's kind of unilateral. We all share that same design, right? Again, with slight variations, but typically most of us, and for the largest majority of us, it's wired the same way. It's designed for the limited spectrum of information that it has access to. Right.
Oh, and the information that we're required to have, like some animals have ultraviolet sensory eyes.
Yeah. So for those animals that have hypersenses, that they're even far more acute than ours, they experience, again, a much larger reality. I don't know, you ever heard that urban myth where like you can't get a dog to go into a room that's like supposedly, allegedly a haunted space, like that has a ghost?
I've heard of that.
Yeah. Okay. So maybe maybe something like that demonstrates that the greater the acuity or the better the senses, that you can have a greater perception of the reality. But because ours are downgraded compared to, say, the sense of smell a dog has, or the visual acuity of different animals, or because they typically come with hypersenses, that we're oblivious to what they're experiencing. We can't experience what they're experiencing because our senses aren't designed to experience it, although theirs are, right? And their nervous system, again, parallels ours in terms of the way that it was developed to specifically interpret this reality. So then any animal with a hypersense gets a much larger picture, or a picture to a much larger reality, right? That we can't share unless we do something to alter our nervous system to make it more receptive to a much larger reality.
Right. We were talking about this earlier, and this is the part that I found so fascinating, because it's like I'll look at a photo, I'll have a certain emotional reaction. Your emotional reaction is different because it's subjective, whereas you're in a long exposure of a DMT drip like they did for the study.
Yeah.
And you guys see the same thing. It's like, okay, so it's not merely subjective, or if it is, it's something so ingrained in human culture that, like, I don't think it is. I
think people from diverse cultures experience the same thing. Is it innate in humans? I think you're partly right in that it's innate in that we have the once you introduce something like that, or through trauma or through meditation, you're able to expand the the function of the nervous system to allow for you to perceive a much larger reality. And within that much larger reality, there's a high occurrence and probability of similar experiences. So some have argued, well, it's just like the human brain and drugs. Every human brain will react the same way. But here's the thing, and now we'll get into the distinction between hallucinations and the DMT realm. So hallucination, like that might be like if you consumed LSD or copious amounts of, say, other drugs, and you start to hallucinate. The hallucinations are going to be very specific to the individual having those hallucinations.
Right.
So it'll be a reflection of them and their subjectivity.
Yeah, like I was saying, like it's a lot towards their culture. They'll have these certain experiences. Like the painting example I used, like different emotional reactions. That's something that's more loose and hard to pin down. But when it comes to like strictly, hey, I saw a robotic elf. It had green shoes and crazy eyes, or whatever that person's experience was. Having even a mildly similar experience to that would be absolutely fascinating, and it would suggest something that's more than cross-cultural. It's something that's in our biology.
Or that we're all experiencing the same much larger reality. So these creatures that are encountered, this disembodied intelligence, these half I think they refer to them as fairy anthropes, that they're half human, half animal, these mechanical elves, all these encounters, they're not random like hallucinations. So when you get into the DMT realm, what you're having is an interaction with something that has insights about you specifically. So it addresses things that are uppermost in your mind, and it answers some of those questions that you can't find answers to. It presents an insight or an answer. So it's a dialogue that you're having with these entities. Whereas with an hallucination, you're just experiencing the hallucination. Whereas within the DMT realm, you're actually interacting with whatever it is that's presented in front of you. You're engaged with it. It's carrying on a dialogue and a full-on conversation. And then you get the sense that it understands you, right? That it in the way that like it knows your experiences, and that's why it conveys solutions, right? And for addicts and people who have mental health issues, there's a high occurrence of resolution of those experiences without them defaulting back into the experiences or having a remission. There's again, the numbers are so high, they're unusually high. So this is what has attracted the attention of the researchers.
That's funny because originally they used like ayahuasca as a pilgrimage of sorts. Like they would
it was a religious experience.
Yeah, right? They would journey into their own soul, and now these people in modern times are going, they were onto something.
100%.
Can I use this to resolve personal issues?
100%. So that is what is actually drawing the attention of researchers and people in general. So you're going to have those who are only interested in a thrill, so that's why they seek it out. But for those who are struggling with issues, under the right settings, under the guidance of proper psychiatry, it could produce the resolution to any and all mental health issues. So again, but it certainly does require more research, which is why they're doing the research and why they're putting subjects under sustained DMT intravenous. So they're intravenously applying the DMT to them. And then throughout the course of the experience, the volunteer is supposed to vocalize everything they're experiencing. And the hopes is that what they're trying to do is then to create a map of the DMT realm, that it's an actual that it's an actual reality, right? More real than real. And by mapping that reality, the hope is that if there's any truth to that they're encountering disembodied intelligences, that the researchers through the volunteers may be able to establish a dialogue with, in a non-conventional sense, an alien intelligence. That it's not really alien, that it's probably been paralleling us since the beginning of humanity, that it's been a part of humanity, but it's just outside of our ability to perceive it. But again, under the right circumstances and exposure to the right to the right compounds or elements, can allow for us to have that much larger experience, right? So it's this fascinating idea that now potentially the first interplanetary or the first alien encounter might be an extra-dimensional one outside of 3D reality that we experience, and it might just be like an intelligence. Now, not to be fair, not everybody has a super positive experience. A small minority have unpleasant experiences on taking DMT in whatever form that they choose to do it in. But so again, it speaks to the idea like there's nothing's perfect, and that this, again, you should approach this with respect and not be foolish and to place yourself at risk, right? Like so if you choose to do this, anybody listening to this, please, like, exercise good caution. So, and what does that mean? If you're doing ayahuasca, make sure you're getting it from, if you're going to do it in the presence of a shaman and somebody who's going to be there to help guide you through the experience, should the experience go poorly, or psychiatrist. So I don't even know whether or not that's optional in terms of treatment right now. I don't believe that it is, because it's still subject to research, right? So it's something that you can volunteer for. So imagine that our first alien communication won't occur over high technology. It'll occur through a mind that's been exposed to drugs, and then a researcher who's using that person as a medium.
So a different high technology.
Yeah, a different high technology. No, it was awesome. So this high technology will be used to then be able to establish communications and a dialogue with, a truly foreign, truly alien intelligence.
It's so fascinating that this is being done like through universities and grants, because it's not just that it's promising as a mental health tool, but if it does have these more drastic implications, that means like we have some things to review about human culture, human history, behavior. Like, it really would turn the world not upside down, but a new shade of it.
I agree that it would act as a revolutionary kind of agent within society, because everything that I've described right now, it essentially makes it a panacea, this cure-all, right? That it has multiple functions. Not only does it represent the potential to address addiction and mental health issues, but it also becomes this means by which we can communicate with, again, I use the word very in the broadest sense, an alien intelligence, and that we could actually have a direct interaction with something that's not human, right? So it's very intriguing, like this idea that that maybe high technology isn't the solution to the problem, and so the problem is our inability to understand things in a broadest sense, and from the macros to the micro, right? So in terms of understanding, so it's the potential now for us to be able to explore and adventure into realms that we never believed possible before. So then we all have the potential to become psychonauts, right? But as in terms of not just having like a drug-induced experience, but that you're an explorer of that experience, because there might be actual value in exploring that experience, because you're actually mapping out a portion of reality that most of us are oblivious to. That and if 95% of the whole of reality we're completely oblivious to, it suddenly opens the door to a portion of that reality that we don't experience from day to day, and that could become could be integrated into the way that our society functions, right? So again, really trippy stuff. Like, it's mind bending. Like, it's it's the trippiest science fiction. It's like, have you seen the Dune movies or read any of the Dune books?
I've seen the Dune trailers. That's it.
Oh, okay. So so it might be so you know that what drives that whole galactic empire is the spice, and it's only found in one place. I don't want to make an analogy, but what if it's like that? What if then DMT, regular exposure, regular usage of it, then does allow for us to have more profound and deeper human experiences that are outside of the normal waking reality that we experience. And here's the thing, you're not exploring a hallucination, you're exploring another physical reality, or an extension of this reality, like into another physical space that otherwise you can't access.
Oh, if it's, I can think about like the change in consciousness, how it might affect like you as a biological being, and this concept of like being beside another intelligent consciousness that may be foreign to our own bodies. If it's within our own bodies, I was thinking it wouldn't be like physical travel in the way we think of. It would be like localizing part of the psyche that we're not familiar with.
Astral projection?
In a sense, yeah. No, it's like internal astral projection. That's if these entities...
But you're actually traveling into a real physical space, but you can only do it as a mental construct. You don't physically experience it. Like you in a weird way, you do have the physical experience of it, but you don't experience it in this physical reality. So it's another layer to the waking reality that we already inhabit, but it's just outside of our capacity to engage with it.
Yeah, okay. No, that's different than what I was initially thinking. But if it's quite literally like astral projection, where you're going through like these geomorphic areas, like you're
right, and it's how you transition into this other reality. Maybe that's why those geometric patterns are reoccurring, and they're moving. None of this stuff is static. Everything's moving, and the majority of people who have these experiences come away from the experiences, like I said, euphoric, elated. They feel like they've had something profound occur to them, so that it makes them more at ease, right? So again, it becomes this cure-all, right? Or potentially, right? And again, it would be irresponsible to make an assertion like that without further research and study. But where we are currently, it's super suggestive. So why are we wasting all this money on building spaceships and stuff? Maybe for within our solar system, but because of time dilation, we understand the impracticality of traveling through space in a conventional way. So that, look, when you see the stars at night, you're seeing the light from a star that, depending on how far away it is, so say it's 100,000 light years away, that means the light that you're seeing, that, say tonight when you go out and stare at this star, it's from 100,000 years ago. That star could have exploded and is gone, but we won't, like currently, presently, like at this moment in time, but we won't experience that for another 100,000 years. It won't blink out of existence, because that's how long it takes for the light to get here, right? So the time dilation. And the closer you move to the speed of light and faster and quicker away from if you're in a spaceship and you're accelerating close to the speed of light away from the planet Earth, and then you come back, a considerable amount of time will have occurred, like time will have advanced on the planet. So the planet you return to is not the planet you left. So all these occurrences and stuff, suddenly with DMT, you can what if it's, it opens up the human consciousness to a degree that you're able to instantaneously interact with other intelligences from anywhere in the universe.
That might also mean that there's some sort of, I don't want to say physical, like ley lines, but like interconnectedness between consciousness in general.
Well, unless it's all one large consciousness, and then what you're doing is you're just, you only experience your consciousness typically subjectively, that it's your consciousness. But it's like saying that, it's like saying that you're a drop of water that's oblivious to the rest of the ocean. There's no ocean without the drop of water. And even though in language we refer to it as a drop of water or our individual consciousness as a singular entity, the fact of the matter is it doesn't exist outside of the ocean, an ocean of consciousness or an ocean of water droplets. And there's no distinction. So you're not actually, there's no lines to travel. You just have to break down the barrier that's dividing you from that other conscious. And so that then again, maybe DMT's again it's what potentially allows for that.
I wonder what it would be like from that perspective, just looking around going like, oh, there's my corporeal form and there's someone else's, but it's sort of mine. If those people...
Well, you're directly connected, but you experience it as a single entity.
Yeah. No. Yeah, I'm saying once you delocalize from your body, like just the experience seems completely different.
It's a different experience, but you're still experiencing it as a single entity. You're the single adventurer. You're not going in there and go, oh, I'm now one with everything. Although maybe potentially that could be a byproduct of the experience, right? So it's this really super interesting thing that could completely perturb the way our society develops, right? Like, imagine then that it becomes not only legalized but freely accessible, much like marijuana, and then people culturally, what we do is we learn how to sit with somebody who's going through the experience and guide them to ensure that they have a positive experience. And from what I understand too, for those who take it, I've never taken it myself. I have no real intention of doing it. But if I were going to do it, it would be in the care of like somebody like who would sit with me, like a shaman or psychiatrist, and just in the event that the experience is an unpleasant one. But having said that, what I understand from most people who experience it, if you go into it with a negative intention, it's what you'll get. But if you go into it with a sense of awe and your openness, you have this, like I say, this profoundly moving experience, right?
It's so profound. I genuinely don't know what questions I have. I have like at least 5, but it's not reasonable to assume all the prerequisites or all the the overlying rules that would make my question make sense in this physical reality over there. It might not make any sense whatsoever. Because like you're familiar with like I think it's Eleusinian
Hallucinian mysteries. Yeah.
The geometry, Euclid geometry, some elucid geometry.
No. Euclidean geometry.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's like spheres, cubes, pyramids. What is the other?
I might be thinking of something.
No, that's Euclidean geometry. So it's the idea that all shapes and forms within the universe correspond to these like 5 basic shapes that they're found in everything, right?
Right.
So it's often referred to as sacred geometry.
I might have some question that's pertaining to that sort of geometry, but it wouldn't be reasonable to ask that same question within this extra dimensional space. I'm using air quotes, because is it like literal space, or is conscious space different?
I couldn't say definitively,
Right.
but I can tell you what they say: more real than real. What could be more real than this? So you can infer that what they mean is that their experience. So these geometric patterns and shapes, which are probably fluid and moving. So they think of you used the word earlier before off camera, like a mandala, which is basically a bunch of geometric shapes, but artfully presented. And they fold in and out of themselves and in and out of all the different geometric shapes available. So maybe that's the transition zone. Maybe that's your brain interpreting the actual structure and building blocks of reality, and then you're transiting from the building blocks of this one into another one, into another reality. Andrew Gilmore suggested that the way that we experience the DMT realm is that it comes into that it's like we're adapted to it. So then we have that's why we have that super vivid experience there that's not less vivid than this experience here. So you're just having an extra experience. So think of it as an add-on, right? So now you expand, think of it as expanding the experience of this reality, and you add new elements to the experience. But you only have them through the course of the experience. So while you're having the DMT trip, right? And then when you come out of the trip, you're elated, you feel like, again, this is what I wouldn't know, but this is how other people I've heard who are regular consumers, how they reflect on the experience. And they would tell you then, like a dream, the longer you're out of the experience, the less you're able to recall of the experience. You lose details. That's why they wanted to put people under and in a sustained experience, and then be able to record what they were experiencing. And then they can compile all that data to go, here, this is what this place is like. This is what this place potentially is or isn't. So you referred to it earlier as being metaphysical. This is the mystical experience manifest in 3D reality, just outside of 3D reality. It's, so DMT is the conduit to it, just outside the 3D reality. So what if it's 4th dimensional reality? Isn't what quantum physics saying there are 11 dimensions to reality, and we're only experienced 3?
Yeah, for the mathematics they want,
okay.
For string theory, they say there has to be at least 11 dimensions.
All right, so
they say at least, though.
Okay, well, because you can't prove it, much like the experiences we're talking about. All we have are anecdotal accounts, but you could apply a scientific investigation into those accounts, and then by compiling the accounts, you can start to see patterns occurring within the accounts, and then you can make insights, or you can speculate on those reoccurring patterns and the frequency of the patterns, like, because there'll be some telling details if you're able to create a recorded body of information about the experiences, right? So how would I know that the conversation that people on DMT are having with this embodied intelligence isn't just them having a conversation with their own brain, because their brain's on drugs? But then again, they might actually be having an experience and interacting and having dialogue and conversations with entities that have nothing to do with them. And this is just the window or the door that opened up that experience to them.
For me, the characterization of like these different entities that people have been saying, like the purple lady, the machine elves, like these things are they're very suggestive to me that it would be something that's outside of our own biology.
Well, or psychology rather, because it's a reoccurring themes. But I think people make the argument that because the reoccurring themes within our psychology, that it might be actually because there's a high occurrence of it, that it just says that it's a byproduct of a brain on drugs, right? So by mapping it, mapping the DMT realm out, that they might be able to make some conclusions then, like in terms of whether or not you're actually engaging with a disembodied intelligence. I would offer up this: when you think about UAPs, I know it's completely off topic, especially in light of like now how much they're coming forward with the idea of UFOs and UAPs, and the weird nature of the experience. You can never get like perfect detailed photos. Mostly everything's anecdotal. Well, what if the intelligence that we access through the DMT experience, what if that's them attempting to manifest here in this reality? Because when we take DMT, it's us reaching out to them. So what if those disembodied intelligence, when they reach out to us, they use things like Merkabas, or which is basically essentially a spaceship or extra dimensional or trans-dimensional spaceship created as a byproduct of their mind, and it would explain why they're able to perform, these high G maneuvers that would essentially crush any living organism, unless they could had some way to alleviate the effects of like gravity and that sort of thing on the occupants in those craft. What if there's no occupant? It's just a mental construct, and it's them not so much toying with us, but within their abilities trying to reach into a three-dimensional reality to go, hey, we're here, we've always been here with you. And what if that's the ultimate thing that comes out of this? That suddenly DMT, which broadens, say that for the sake of argument, broadens the nervous system to make us better able to experience a much larger reality. That's us venturing into their reality. And then the UAP and UFOs it is their attempt, this disembodied or extra dimensional intelligence, them reaching into our dimension.
At least as an observer. But like that's interesting. If they don't want to create any change, but they're here to observe, that must mean like.
Or maybe it's just that represents the limits of how they in a very limited way. That's the limits of what they can do. I couldn't say with any real definitive certainty. But what if that's why the experience is always the UFO experience, which has been going on since like World War II, UFOs, right? Right, so that maybe that's why it's always occurred in a limited capacity. It's always lights and shimmering objects that you can't get a detailed picture of, right?
Oh, that reminds me actually. Since they're trying to find ways to like organize the DMT realm, you introduced me to Jacques Vallée, and I forget the book's name, but he lays out like different ways to systematically write your experience with this extraterrestrial, whether it was a light or what seems like a physical form, what kind of maneuvers it had, did it split apart, was it an orb, like all these different things.
Again, that's just to create a database. Where then you look for reoccurring patterns, and then you can draw conclusions from those patterns. Like that's that's good research, right?
Yeah, I'm just saying it might be comparable to have like that data chart beside the DMT data chart or the realm.
Oh, right. But again, that could, what we could end up finding, say, further down the road with more research, that they absolutely overlap. But this is all speculation. But it's interesting speculation. It's the
Yeah.
kind of thing that's worthy of consideration, especially if what it leads to is us ultimately now interacting with a non-human intelligence, like that we establish like a relationship with an intelligence that's not us, right?
There would be so many amazing questions to have. Like, this is truly great space to adventure if you're able to.
Again, like I said, I'm just, my approach has always been I'm going to do it through meditation, because to me the disciplined approach allows for me to unpack the experience, and then maybe then better able to manage the total experience, right? That if through meditation you're able to achieve that, then it would make me better suited to engage in dialogue, excuse me, in conversation with this non-human intelligence. And as for Jacques Vallée, like a lot of what we talked about here today, um, the interpretation of like mythological tales of like fairy rings or magical creatures was the earliest iteration of the UFO phenomenon, and he demonstrated it really well in his book Passport to Magonia. He doesn't think that what's currently is going on, he's not convinced that they're entirely nuts and bolts spacecraft, but they could be, right? So again, we don't have definitive answers in terms of what like DMT does. DMT gives us, at the very least, a broader uh, degree of consciousness, so that we're able to experience the outside reality again in a more profound kind of way, right? Because like I said, it trips me out when I think about uh, the potential there, especially if the current thinking is that it is what it is. It's not just a mind expanding and altering drug. It's critical to our biology and the way we interpret reality. And as a result of that through the usage of it, it allows for us to experience a greater reality that you couldn't experience in your regular waking state, and that we might get a glimpse into in our dream state, assuming that when we're in our dream state, say the body makes more of the endogenous DMT available during the sleeping state, and allow for us to have these vivid dreams that they might be windows into that, but it's just a glimpse, right? So again, this conversation is like a dog chasing its tail, but potentially it represents this idea that for mental health and for broadening consciousness and what consciousness can be aware of, like I said, it becomes this mystical kind of elixir of heightened human capacity. Travel without vehicles, because you travel through the mind. You can achieve higher states of mental acuity and function, and and allow for us to again, when I initially read that, like DMT's is antiviral, antibacterial, has all these other functions, right? That so to it could be this universal panacea. And the wildest thing is it occurs naturally in you, and that if you take in extra, you can bump up the capacity of what you're capable of, truly leveling up.
I mean, when you say you want to take the meditation approach, I think that's definitely a more reasonable way to go about it, unless you're able to get into these studies. Because if you think about somebody who drops too much LSD or mushrooms or even too much cannabis, they do have a drastically bad time. And
Well, again, this is all okay. So now
it's all up to like the individual.
right, and now you're talking about personal usage or just usage in general. Much like everything else, it requires you to approach it with a sense of responsibility. You don't have to. You can be as reckless as you want, and there's tons of people out there who they live by that shit, right? They're wasting their existence. There's no nice way to say that. If you fucking spend all your time fucking drinking and doing drugs, and not even the good drugs, with DMT being good, the good drug, you're somebody who's just looking to be distracted. You don't give a shit enough about your own existence or the fact that you're part of this existence, which is only a part of a much larger, potentially a much larger existence. You don't give a shit about nothing. So in terms of how that works out, I don't fucking care what you do. Right? It's your fucking business, but I don't want to interact with people like that. So fuck you.
Those are
Right?
probably the individuals that would have the worst trips because they're not going at it as if it's a pilgrimage to like genuinely discover something that's important.
Right. I again, it'd be irresponsible to suggest people just start taking this shit.
Yeah.
But people are going to do whatever they're going to do. But to me, like I said, based on what little we know, this is worthy of greater investigation, and the fact that it's occurring, to me, it's encouraging that so many researchers are taking this seriously, and they see the multitude of things that it could do for us as individuals and collectively as a society. So imagine if this became a regular part of psychology and psychiatric work, and then people would use it to have vision quests of their own, so that to have more profound sense of self. Becomes this panacea, this cure-all, universal drug, right? That has for the largest percentage of us has almost zero negative effects. I'm like going, again, it might speak to the fact that we just do things wrong, ass backwards. We don't, and we adhere to these old models so hard. It's at the expense of any kind of real personal advancement and development, not just as individuals, but collectively as a society, because we hold on to these old tropes that are probably best served to be left in the past, right? So again, but that's up to the individual, but it's, again, worthy of your consideration and worthy of conversation. Can I get a time check?
Yep, we're past an hour, almost an hour 10.
Unless you have something else you'd like to add, I think we're pretty close to summing up. What do you say?
I'm just fascinated by this because, frankly, I could spend all day trying to reduce it to like very materialistic perspective. Even that is amazing. Like it's a really interesting drug.
And again, I think we might even do ourselves a disservice by referring to it as a drug, right? I don't know that if it falls under the clinical definition of one, but because it's endogenous, already exists in plants, animals, and humans. It's everywhere. How can, and it occurs naturally then, and yet most drugs are usually a product of some kind of manipulation. It's rare that they eat, unless, well, pot is the only one that I know that you take right off the vine and start enjoying. But it's part of cultures. I think, again, in the Amazonian tribes, who for them it's a religious sacrament, and they've been using it in that capacity time immemorial, right? So here we are as human beings and confronted with elevated states of fear. The world is at odds with itself more than it's ever been. We have crises between generations, and most of the stuff is just ridiculous and would be fair to be characterized as being childish, and that suddenly this represents the capacity to maybe take a huge leap past that immaturity and then maybe start acting like proper adults, right? Again, more just speculation on our part, but to me, based on, again, what little we know, that's what I see. Yeah.
I totally agree. Like we're definitely at this point culturally where people are concerned with um, not only like cultural issues, but should there be a war? We have the hydrogen bomb. We also have those fission bombs, which have the those nukes with the
Right.
radioactive fallout. It's like we have capabilities far beyond what we could physically do. Like we're not the strongest, we're not the fastest in any
No,
regard.
we're the most adaptable.
Yeah,
That's what makes us unique.
yeah. So I think that's perfect. It's a chance to adapt.
I would agree that this would push our ability to adapt into regions that we've never considered before. And why should the exploration of the mind be shunned because of the use of drugs? I mean, it's nobody's fucking business what people do with their own body and their own mind, right? But having said that, I don't I don't endorse irresponsible, reckless, casual use of fucking drugs. Right? That's childish. It's that fucking monkey that's been had its brain wired in such a way that its pleasure center gets stimulated every time a button gets pushed, and then you give the monkey the button. It suddenly can't do anything other than keep pushing the fucking button. So here we are as humanity. We're on the verge of, we've always been in crisis, but now it's more real than it's ever been, with the potential threat of nuclear annihilation, or if it's not complete, a partial annihilation, destabilization of our societies. And everybody's driven by fear and reckless and stupid. Maybe everyone should be having a DMT trip. Okay? Then maybe it might be the thing. To me, the answer is we change the nature of our relationship with our functions of our psychology, and then and part of the way you train that is meditation, and the meditation would then potentially allow for you to be able to access much greater depths of our nervous system, psychology, and our mind. So, and for everyone, not meditation doesn't work for everyone. So maybe this is the way to go for some people. For me, I favor meditation. I'm not really big on the idea of being dependent on something external. And meditation is just a method of practice that if you engage with it and you engage with it correctly, using and considerately and thoughtfully, it leads to interesting places, just as interesting as everything that we've just discussed. So I see the potential now. Everybody's driven by fear and afraid of the state of affairs. I see is now the potential to turn everything around, to turn it all over. I don't see the end, right? That's what people are trapped in their distraction, don't want to pay attention, completely irresponsible with regards to existence. They only give a shit about their personal gain, money, material existence. Fuck you. You're the fucking problem. So the resolution to this problem is to elevate yourself. You just have to figure out which method you're going to use. Maybe that's a good place to close it. Yeah?
I think so.
Any comments? Final comments? Final thing you'd like to say?
I'm 100% with you. We've been stuck to this button and we're pressing it over and over. We have cell phones, accessible like diabetes, like down the street. You go to the a store that is cheap and you get, candy bars.
And endless supply of shit food, or something that passes as food, but it's not food.
We're in a place where I have to admit, I think we're intentionally conditioned to either fail drastically quickly or rise to the top drastically quickly. And for most people, I think we're prone to failure.
And that often leads to self-destruction, right? So I'm like, and nobody's coming to save you. No government, no religious figure, none of that shit. But here's the thing that's truly great. You have the capacity to save yourself. So I encourage you, save your own ass. Figure it the fuck out. You can do it. Or you won't. I'm not going to be one of those who don't. Right? Now, having said all that, I think I'd like to finish by saying, question everything, including yourself, especially yourself. Seek balance, seek knowledge, seek understanding. Become a renegade, individualist, humanist, critical objective thinker. Thank you for your time. Good night.